This is not a story about a police interrogation team. The title refers to me, Brad Owen, at different times in my life. I think most people are born good guys. According to my parents, I was a good guy until I was a teenager. Then I became arrogant, indiscreet, arrogant, call it what you will, because I achieved national success in the art of fencing and, without any effort on my part, acquired a heart-stopping appearance. I certainly wasn't a good guy when I was breaking the hearts of teenage girls by treating them poorly, and my vain attitude made me nothing less than a bad guy in relationships with almost everyone I came in contact with. I didn't break out of my bad boy mode until three things happened during my freshman year of college. The first woman I really wanted a real relationship with left me after 4 months of marriage because I was too arrogant. She had no problem telling me this to my face. I lost in both foil and saber in the semifinals of the NCAA championships after winning both times last year. And because of my drunken behavior, the first two disappointments resulted in me being expelled from school. After my expulsion, I went on a solo wilderness trek for a month to clear my head. In the end, I was able to objectively evaluate my unacceptable behavior and came to the understanding that if I did not change, I would never become a productive member of society or have a decent long-term relationship with the woman I wanted, that is, with one who was not superficial. After working in several menial jobs that I would have considered far beneath my dignity before my exile, and devoting many hours to charitable work to ease my conscience, I looked at all the possible professions that would be socially productive and for which I could apply without returning to college to get a diploma. I settled on a fireman. Although I never aspired to be a firefighter or police officer as a child, this career suddenly appealed to me because it was definitely socially productive, and also it was not a desk job, but a job that was both physical and mental, and because it gave me a lot of free time to do other things that would improve my life, my personality, and my situation. Once I came to this conclusion, I decided to try everything to the end and become a firefighter in New York. I moved to New York, trained harder than I had ever trained in fencing, and after I became a resident, I applied for a job. My main problem with being hired as a firefighter was the requirement to demonstrate good character and pass a preliminary interview due to my college dropout. I addressed this issue directly by setting up a meeting with the dean who dismissed me and playing coy. I convinced her. I was realistic enough to admit that my good looks and sincere baby blue eyes helped me, that a turning point had come in my life. I brought recommendations from the charities I had worked for since I was expelled. I told her that I hadn't had a drop of alcohol since I was expelled, and basically convinced her that I was no longer a bad guy, but a good guy. She told me to ask the New York City Fire Department to contact her directly, and she would close the issue on my expulsion. With the help of the dean, and because I passed the physical and mental tests with flying colors, I was fortunate enough to get a job in the fire department. I started working in 2000. Most of the men in my fire department were friendly and welcoming, and we even had a few social events with our wives and children. Of particular interest in this story were Chuck Brixey and his wife Evelyn, and Tom Watson and his wife Cheryl. Chuck seemed to me more confident than most of the other firefighters and was otherwise obnoxious, and his wife Evelyn seemed too easygoing to deal with his temper. It was none of my business, so I kept my thoughts to myself. The situation with Tom and Cheryl was almost the opposite. Tom was a good, straightforward person with a gentle personality, and Cheryl was strong. I tried really hard not to judge Cheryl because I felt like she was just like me when I was the bad guy. She was extremely sexy, tall, slender, and pretty, with big breasts and a nicer ass than one would expect from a thin woman, and she knew it. However, she also knew how to flirt when she needed to, and she flirted with me the first 2 times I met her. This made me very nervous. This shit became proverbial on September 11, 2001, after I had been at this job for less than a year. Our fire department lost 3 good members that day, including Tom Watson. The next year really sucked. There would be enough tragedy, fear, and resentment to last a lifetime. Then things got even worse for some members of our fire department community. Cheryl had barely collected Tom's death insurance when I started hearing rumors that Chuck was dating her. The problem was that Chuck was still married to Evelyn, and that didn't sit well with her, especially since they had two small children. Even though I didn't like it either now that I was a good guy, I kept my mouth shut at first, even though all my respect for Chuck was gone. I kept my mouth shut until Chuck divorced Evelyn and married Cheryl, when he made the wrong boast about how he was going to get primary custody of his and Evelyn's children because she didn't have money to properly care for them. And he and Cheryl were flush in no small part because of a life insurance payout. Something inside me snapped, and when he told his story about how he took Evelyn to court to take the children, I spat in his face. "You're a slimy piece of shit, Brixie. You divorced the mother of your children for a nicer ass, and then you want to destroy her by taking her children away. Do you have no conscience?" At first surprised by my aggressiveness, Chuck became aggressive too. I didn't give up. We swore loudly at each other. While other members of the company tried to defuse the situation, Chuck made the mistake of taking a swing at me. Most people probably don't realize that fencing is similar to a martial art in many ways. It requires the same discipline, skill, training, and speed. His first blow barely grazed me as I retreated with the skill of the rapier champion I once was. And after that, Chuck received a severe thrashing before I was pulled away from him by other firemen. Of course, an investigation was carried out. We both received a reprimand, but since it was clear that we could never work together again, neither of us applied for it, and because he had seniority, I was transferred to another, less desirable, company. One good thing that came out of this was that no one ever bothered me again. I forgot to mention earlier that Chuck is 15 centimeters taller and 20 kilograms heavier than me, and is considered a real tough guy. The other unpleasant thing, besides the transfer and reprimand it brought about, was my thirst for revenge, which emphasized the bad guy traits in me, more than the good guy traits that I had been cultivating in myself for the past 3 or 4 years. Even before all the noise caused by our quarrel had died down, I began to contemplate my revenge. When I had free time and one of Evelyn's children was at school and the other was at her mother's house, I agreed to visit her. Evelyn was in a terrible state. She had serious problems making ends meet. She was really losing her self-esteem, was depressed about the possibility of losing her children, and looked like she didn't care about herself. I had a frank conversation with her. "Evelyn, I know you don't know me very well, but I want to tell you a little about me so you know where the proposal I'm about to make to you comes from," I told her, holding her hand. There was a slight sparkle in her eyes before she said, "Okay, I'm curious." I told her about my past, not embellishing the times I was an asshole, but telling her how much I wanted to be a good guy. Then I told her about the fight with Chuck, which she hadn't really heard about since she had been living as a recluse for the past few months, and about my desire for revenge. "This is where you come in handy, Evelyn," I smiled. "How so?" she asked with a classic look of bewilderment on her face. "I can get revenge and restore my good guy image at the same time. I want to move here with you and your children, to tell the whole world that we are engaged," I smiled. "Is this some kind of stupid joke?" she asked, pulling her hand out of mine. "In no case. Listen to me. You are afraid of losing your children because of your financial situation. If your fiancé, that is, me, lives with you, you can also count on my income when filing an application with the court. I can also testify about what a jerk Chuck is, how he bad-mouthed you at the police station, and I can talk about all the charity work I used to do with kids and how I hope to quickly build a good relationship with both of them," I continued. "But you don't even know me. You are much more beautiful than me. Why do you want to marry me, and who will believe it?" she asked. "We wouldn't actually get married. We'd just say we'd be married long enough for you to have clear custody of your kids, and then I'd probably disappear without calling off our engagement," I smiled again. "But what will this give you?" she asked, obviously seriously considering the situation. Would you like to have sex with me? No, I wouldn't. My lease expires in 6 weeks. I would pay you the same as I would pay there, and I would still have a nicer place to live. Besides, you would have to prepare food for me during your free time. Just for show, I laughed, although I would buy most of the food. Besides, I love children very much and would be glad to be with you. But the two main things I'll take away from this, which is where I started, is that I'll get my revenge on Chuck. This will drive him crazy and make me feel like the good guy I strive to be, I concluded. Evelyn was obviously seriously considering my proposal. I left, leaving her with the names and phone numbers of 3 women I had casually dated who could confirm that I was not a predator. The names of 2 firefighters from my former fire department who liked me better than Chuck and could give her an independent report on my fight with Chuck. She also asked me to speak with her lawyer. Only 2 days later, Evelyn called me and not only agreed with my plan, but also thanked me profusely. I met her again the next day when I was off duty, and we made the necessary preparations. I was shocked at how much better she looked in just 3 days. It was like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. I just needed to clarify a few points. Just a few moments, Evelyn, I smiled. First of all, we shouldn't fall in love with each other. We do this for our own reasons, not for love, and neither of us should have any expectations about a real loving relationship. I understand, she smiled in response. Secondly, we don't want to lie, so I'm going to ask you to marry me and put this priceless cubic zirconia engagement ring on your finger, okay? I said, taking out a beautiful but inexpensive zirconium ring from my pocket. She smiled even wider and nodded her head. And you're going to say you'll marry me, right? That's right, she grinned. So I asked her, and she agreed. We quickly kissed each other on the lips, and I put the ring on her finger. I then handed her a check for what amounted to 1 month's rent for me and made arrangements for when to move my things. Evelyn's child custody hearing in family court took place 30 days after I moved into Evelyn's house. By that time, I had already developed a relationship with her children, a 5-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. They were easy to get along with, and, given the obvious improvement in their mother's behavior since I moved in, they gained confidence very quickly. To avoid this being a surprise, we asked the children not to say anything to Chuck on the days he picked them up from his current visiting schedule. I was sleeping in the guest room when we met with Evelyn's lawyer, Vivian, 2 days before the hearing, and she blew us away. Look, Brad and Evelyn, I know you can be truthful about many aspects of your engagement, but there is one thing that bothers me. What if they ask if you sleep in the same bed or have sex? I can't let you lie. My responsibility to the court will not allow me to represent the client in such circumstances. If you just sleep together and have sex the night before, then you can honestly answer yes, and I assure you that I can answer all but the first question, Vivian said. Evelyn began to cry as she turned to me. Brad, I'm so sorry. I know this wasn't your plan. I really know that you are not at all interested in me. I cut her off. No problem, I told Vivian. We can honestly say that we slept in the same bed and we had sexual intercourse before the hearing. Evelyn looked shocked. We discussed a few more issues and then left Vivian's office. On the way home, Evelyn was embarrassed. Brad, if you don't want to have sex with me, I understand, and we can do the best we can. I know I'm unwanted. Oh, stop it, I chuckled. Listen, Evelyn, you've changed a lot since that idiot left you and I moved in with you. Most men would find you desirable. If you agree to have sex with me, I will gladly agree. You don't think that by having sex with you, I'll be doing you a big favor, do you? I grinned. Tomorrow evening, the night before the hearing, we will sleep together in your bed, and what will be will be. Fine? Okay, she answered meekly, but I saw a smile on her face, although she tried to hide it. In fact, the changes in Evelyn since the day I first told her about my plan have been stunning. She completely overcame her depression and took good care of herself. The children were happier, and she was literally beaming. I can't say she was someone I would seek sex with because her looks didn't really turn me on, but she definitely wasn't ugly. Plus, I haven't had sex since I moved here, and as everyone knows, bad sex is rare. The night before the hearing, I could tell Evelyn was nervous, but I calmed her down by helping her clean up after dinner, playing a fun family game with her and the kids, and then massaging her shoulders while we watched TV after the kids went to bed. After we showered separately, I climbed into Evelyn's bed naked and waited for her. She modestly came out of the bathroom also naked and blushed. I was surprised at how beautiful her breasts and crotch looked. She hid them really well under her usually conservative clothes. When Evelyn got into bed, she went to turn off the lamp next to the bed, the only source of light in the room. I stopped her. "I want to see you. This will excite me," I smiled. "Okay," she muttered. This was the last word spoken that evening. As soon as she removed her hand from the lamp, I began to caress her. I wanted this to be a pleasant experience for her. Chuck must not have been an attentive lover, because it was clear that Evelyn was not used to being caressed. And what was even clearer was that she really enjoyed it. At first I expected nice, gentle sex and hoped that I would enjoy it. What I felt was an eagerness that I had rarely felt before. It was probably the best sex of my life, despite the lack of real sexual attraction to Evelyn. Apparently, we were both more emotionally and physically exhausted than we thought, because we immediately fell asleep. In the middle of the night, I was in for a surprise when I woke up to Evelyn's caresses. By this time, one of us had apparently turned off the lamp as it was dark, but I knew without a doubt what was happening. Once again, we both reached the top, enjoying it immensely. Evelyn was shy and avoided looking me in the eyes when we woke up the next morning. She took a quick shower in the master bathroom, and I took a quick shower in the adjoining one before the kids got up. She blushed deeply as she served breakfast. I kissed the back of her head and whispered in her ear, "Thank you for last night. You're really fun." The court hearing couldn't have gone better for Evelyn and me. What was most fortunate for Evelyn was that, thanks to my financial assistance and permanent resident status, the main arguments that Chuck and Cheryl were trying to make were completely negated. During our testimony, we were both asked about the legality of our relationship, and we were able to honestly answer that we slept in the same bed, had sexual intercourse, and were engaged. As promised, Vivian was able to stop questioning on this topic after several quick and opaque answers. However, what was perhaps best for our cause was the excellent presentation that Evelyn gave. I think Chuck expected her to be a depressed, defeated woman. However, she came across as an energetic woman who held her own and obviously impressed the judge. Evelyn received sole custody. Chuck could only visit the children once every 2 weeks. What made me happy was how broken and angry Chuck looked, and I felt like a real hero and knew that I had done something right. What I didn't like, however, was the way Cheryl looked. Whereas the previous 2 times I saw her, she looked sexy, dressed like she was for court. Now she looked not just sexy, but sultry. My feelings of being a good guy were interspersed with a desire to fuck her into oblivion. Obviously, my reaction did not go unnoticed. Chuck growled at me, Cheryl smiled knowingly, and Evelyn giggled. Evelyn was overjoyed to hear the results of the hearing. That evening, after the kids went to bed, she sat on my lap on her couch. Tears appeared in her eyes, and she said, "Brad, I could fall in love with you so easily, but I promise I won't. I will never demand anything from you. However, I want you to know that I am available to you anytime you want, for any reason. I know I'm not as sexy as Cheryl, but you can have sex with me and imagine yourself doing it with her." I seemed to have to interrupt her often. I had to do it again. "Stop, Evelyn. Don't compare yourself to anyone else. You are a wonderful woman, and although I have no intention of falling in love with you, I really appreciate your proposal. You were great last night. I will take up your offer in the future, but it is not enough to live up to expectations. Now, maybe we can celebrate today's victory properly." She grinned. 5 minutes later, we were in bed. By the next morning, we were exhausted and satisfied. Living with Evelyn was comfortable, and we even slept together every third night or so. But of course, we both knew that wouldn't last. I wanted to be honest with her and make sure she wouldn't get hurt when I eventually left. So another night, after the kids were put to bed, we had a feast. Evelyn, I want to know how you would feel about me breaking up Chuck and Cheryl by sleeping with her. Be honest, because I don't want to hurt your feelings, I said warily. To my surprise, a wicked grin appeared on Evelyn's face. Actually, I would be glad if you did. Why? I giggled. Because they are my two least favorite people in the world. It would devastate Chuck just like he devastated me, and it would show everyone what a backstabbing bitch Cheryl is, she responded, now in an angry tone. Tell me what you really think, I laughed. She hit me playfully. I know Cheryl is very attractive, but she is superficial. I hope you end up doing better than her, but I want you to be happy and fuck a great ass like this, she replied, now in a friendlier tone. Since I now worked at a different fire department than Chuck, and since Chuck had to tell Evelyn his work schedule as part of the visitation situation, I knew when he was on duty. I organized my schedule so that I would have no work while he was on duty, and then proceeded to explore Cheryl in every way possible. There were other firemen's wives who liked Evelyn and didn't like Cheryl, although they interacted with her quite often. They were happy to give Evelyn everything they could, and Evelyn was happy to pass it on to me. I bumped into Cheryl 3 times in 2 weeks, and each time I was very friendly. She was careful, but did not reject me. The 4th time I bumped into her, I invited her to lunch. What would your little bride say? She grinned rather than growled. We have an open relationship. She would say that if I was stupid enough to hang out with this bitch, then it was my problem, not hers. I think it upset her a little, but I said it with a big smile. That day we had lunch together, and several more times. By the 4th time we had sincerely hugged and kissed goodbye, but I hadn't tried anything serious yet. The 5th time she looked like the cat that ate the canary. Why are you so excited? I asked. I just learned something about you yesterday that really surprised me, she grinned. And? I asked. I just found out that you beat the crap out of Chuck in a fight he started because you acted like a paladin, standing up for little Evelyn, she replied with a devilish grin. What were you thinking that night when he came home with a bloody face, or when I was transferred? If you remember, he was still on duty 24 hours after the fight. He cleaned himself up and told me that you insulted me, that he took away your smirk, but you landed a couple of lucky strikes, she giggled. Why don't you believe in this anymore? I asked. Because 2 eyewitnesses told me the real story. Are you saying that this is not true? No, what the 2 eyewitnesses told you is true. So why are you so excited about this? Because I compared it with what Evelyn told her friends, she replied, this time seemingly unable to contain her glee, and it became clear to me that you are a real, desirable, courageous man. And what did Evelyn tell her friends? I remained unperturbed. That you're twice as good as Chuck in bed, she replied, this time with an even more devilish grin. We looked at each other for a full minute without blinking. Then I said brazenly, I want to prove to you that Evelyn is right. There is a hotel 3 houses away. Let's cancel our order and go there. Without hesitation, she replied, pay the bill. I'll meet you at the entrance after I go to the ladies' room. In the hotel room, when I undressed her, I was convinced that she was the most passionate person in history. We were so engrossed in each other that my usual foreplay was impossible. We were both insatiable, and when the release came, she screamed so loud that the glass cracked, and my release seemed to go on and on and on. We were both half delirious. I turned her to face me as we lay face down and kissed her. It was the best thing I've ever seen. Finally, I grumbled, well, was Evelyn right? Although I never felt the same way about Evelyn as I did about Cheryl, and no finish line with Evelyn was half as good as what I had just experienced. This, of course, seems to be true, but I don't know, she giggled. I need a lot more experience before I can be sure. Long story short, after I got Cheryl to the finish line 3 times, I had to call Evelyn and tell her that I wouldn't be coming to dinner or at all that night. "Are you with this bitch?" Evelyn asked playfully. "A gentleman never tells," I replied, and we both broke off the conversation as soon as Evelyn started laughing. It turned out that the first experience with Cheryl was not even the best. Every sexual experience with her, there were a lot of them over the next 6 months, better than any with anyone else in my life. We suited each other in every way. Surprisingly, not only in bed. While there is no doubt that Cheryl was selfish, could be bitchy, and was obviously a cheater, I found more good qualities in her than bad. I really think her personality problems were related to a lack of self-confidence rooted in her childhood. It would seem that a woman who looks the best in any room she enters must be confident. However, the horror stories she told me about her parents, especially her mother, made me feel sorry for her. Under my guidance, she began taking courses at the local college. She always considered herself stupid, which was compensated by the fact that she acted like a boss. I also boosted her ego in everything except her looks, and she was like a starving man getting a piece of bread every time I gave her a compliment that had nothing to do with her looks. During my courtship of the married ass, as Evelyn liked to call her, my relationship with Evelyn remained the same. What hasn't remained the same is Evelyn herself. It seemed that every day she became more confident, happier, and better looking. Now people who didn't know her story regularly asked her out. She didn't wear her fake wedding ring when she left the house, and I watched the kids as her Uncle Brad a good dozen times while she went on dates. The kids also seemed to be doing well and always wanted to stay at home when Chuck came to pick them up, although Evelyn always made sure they left. A significant event occurred after I had sex with Cheryl for about 4 months. There was a strong fire in an elite apartment building. For some reason, the sprinklers were partially out of order. One young woman, who had been carried out by one of my brother firefighters, came to her senses and began screaming that her 4-year-old daughter, the same age as Evelyn's daughter, was still in the apartment. I got the apartment number from her and began to enter the building just as the rest of my fire department began to evacuate. The chief told me it was too dangerous to go in there and ordered me not to. I started thinking about Evelyn's little daughter and why I became a firefighter, about whether I was a good public servant or a bad guy having sex with a married woman, even if her husband was an asshole that I hated and was forced to enter while screaming, "Get your jump pillow ready." Luckily, my stupidity did not cost me my life. I found a gap in the flames, entered the young mother's apartment, saw a little girl curled up in the corner crying loudly, and walked to the nearest window. Firefighters were installing the cushion 4 floors below, but it was not yet fully inflated. I knew from the flames surrounding me that as soon as I broke the window, there would be a terrible blowback, but I had to act quickly because the smoke was heavy and the little girl was coughing. I broke out the entire window and then immediately jumped, holding the girl to my stomach as she lay on top of me. I fell back onto the pillow. Since the airbag did not have time to fully inflate, the landing was a little rough, but the girl was saved. I spent the night in the hospital where my back was treated and I was monitored. Even though I did a heroic thing, the fire department wasn't really happy with the fact that I disobeyed a direct order and did something really stupid that only worked due to luck. Cheryl, unlike the unit staff, was very pleased with my efforts and the accompanying notoriety. So much so that the next time I saw her, she just massaged my back and satisfied me. "You need to be pampered, not hurt your back by giving me pleasure," she smiled. I was in no condition to object. The fire department conducted an investigation while I was suspended with pay. Once my back felt okay, I had more time to have sex with Cheryl, as well as cheer her up and help with her classes at the local college, so I didn't mind it. But the union lawyer told me I'd probably receive a serious suspension from work without pay and a demotion. 2 weeks before my hearing, I received a call from John Tipton in Pasadena, California. He asked, Are you the same Brad Owen who saved Katie Grimes? Yes, sir, I replied. As far as I heard, this was done not only without outside help, but also contrary to orders, he chuckled. Oh, my lawyer asked me not to talk about this, I muttered, not sure where he was going with this. Let me calm you down. I'm Katie's grandfather. My daughter and granddaughter were estranged from me before the fire, mostly due to my stubbornness and ignorance. I might add, but we have now made peace, so as far as I'm concerned, you saved not only my granddaughter, but my daughter as well. Thank you. I'm glad I could help, Mr. Tipton, I replied. I heard that you could be suspended and possibly even fired for your heroic act, Tipton continued. I hope it doesn't come to dismissal, I answered, wondering where this came from. However, I would like to meet with you about a business opportunity. If my colleague brings you a plane ticket so you can fly to Los Angeles tomorrow, can you come see me? I guarantee it will be worth it. Find me on the Forbes lists, he said confidently. Of course, I'm suspended right now, so I have some free time, I replied. The ticket will be at your fiancée's house this evening, along with instructions. A limousine will pick you up. I'm looking forward to meeting a real hero, he continued and hung up. I immediately found it on the internet. He was not on Forbes' list of the 400 richest Americans. He was ranked 401st, which still made him a billionaire. I excitedly told Evelyn and Cheryl about it as soon as I found out. Evelyn was really happy for me. Cheryl seemed outwardly happy, but internally upset. The ticket was first class. The limousine took me to the airport and picked me up at LAX. I met Tipton's daughter and granddaughter again, who were very kind to me. Tipton met me in his private office, along with his secretary and right-hand man. I studied your biography. For now, you are an underachiever. I need someone with your courage and potential working for me. Here's a proposal. The offer was that I would make 3 times more than a firefighter. I had a car and an apartment at my disposal, as well as many opportunities for advancement. The job description also sounded like something I would enjoy and didn't require me to sit at a desk all day. Do I have 2 weeks to think about it? I asked. Take as much time as you want, within reason, he replied. But I wouldn't think that someone making a split-second decision to enter a burning building would hesitate. If I could only think, I would immediately agree, I grinned. I need to consult with a few more people. My first-class ride home allowed me to rest and clear my head. I arrived home when Evelyn was already in bed, but the next morning at breakfast, I told her everything. You'd be crazy not to agree, she said, but I saw worry in her eyes about how she would make ends meet. Even though she now had a decent job and affordable child care, I didn't think she could afford to lose the rent I was paying her. I reassured her. Until you get married again, I will pay you the same amount every month as now, I said. You don't have to do this, she began to say before bursting into tears. I hugged her. I will ask you to help me sometime in the future, so just accept it and be happy, I smiled. The next day, I met Cheryl in the park. She was alarmed. I told her what they offered me. She answered dryly, I hope you agreed right away. It would be crazy to disagree. No, I haven't accepted the offer yet. I told Tipton that if it were just me, I would immediately agree. However, there is someone else worth thinking about, I said, carefully watching the expectant expression on her face. Who is this? You. What about me? She muttered, stuttering. I want you to come with me, I said. We had another session where we just looked at each other, barely blinking, for the next few minutes. You want me to divorce Chuck and marry you? She finally asked. I want you to divorce Chuck and live with me. After we live together for a while, if you are who I think you are, deep down, behind your pompous facade, I will ask you to marry me, I said calmly. Will you continue to have sex with me in California as often as you do now? She asked, also calmly. Better, because you will definitely be mine, I answered. If we weren't in the park, she would have raped me right there. As it was, she insisted that I take her to her home, where she reduced me to a wreck of sexual bliss. The next week was busy. I gave my car to Evelyn. Cheryl sold hers. We loaded everything we wanted to leave in the trailer, bought a tow-capable SUV, and built a berth into the jump-down rear seats, and got Chuck serviced at the fire department just before we left. Now Chuck will know how Evelyn felt, I chuckled. Cheryl and I made it a point to have sex in every state we passed through while traveling from New York to Pasadena during our 7-day trip. As I write this, it is 2019, about 15 years after I left New York for sunny California. I achieved every goal I could ever dream of in life, including making a ton of money in a job that was right for me. Cheryl and I are actively involved in charity work. We give 10% of our earnings to charity every year, and we paid for both Evelyn's children to go to private college, even though she was happily remarried. I was truly happy for her, and any communication she and Cheryl have now is polite. I have been married to Cheryl for the last 14 years. Although she had memories of her self-centered, bitchy past for the first few years, they became shorter and shorter and didn't appear for at least the last 5 years. Her personality improved greatly when she graduated, and then when she had our 2 children. She became, in my humble opinion, the ideal woman. Besides, she can still and regularly does ravage me in bed, and I her. Sometimes I think, am I a good guy now, despite the fact that I raped a married woman and stole her from her husband? Cheryl is now a good woman, despite the fact that she cheated on her husband with me, but she became the perfect wife. However, I never think about it when I have sex with her. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. Listening to the next one. Listening